Imagine Elon Musk standing on a minimalist stage, no flashy slides, no hype music, just a quiet pause before he speaks, and when he finally does, his tone isn't loud or theatrical but calm, deliberate, almost conversational, as if he's letting you in on a realization that's been building for years. And he starts by saying that for decades people have accepted phone bills the same way they accept gravity, as something unavoidable, something you just live with, month after month, year after year, paying carriers for access to infrastructure that was largely built long ago and already paid for many times over. And he explains that this isn't because it has to be that way, but because nobody has seriously challenged the assumption that connectivity must be rented forever. And then he shifts to the Tesla phone concept, not as a gadget but as a philosophical break from the idea that consumers should endlessly pay for basic digital access, explaining that the $199 price point isn't meant to undercut competitors in a race to the bottom, but to remove fear from adoption, to make the phone accessible enough that people focus on what it changes rather than what it costs. And he describes how the device is built around efficiency rather than excess, using a carefully optimized chipset, a durable body designed to last years instead of being replaced annually, and software stripped of bloat and surveillance-based monetization, because the real innovation, he says, isn't the hardware but the network logic behind it, where the phone is designed from the ground up to operate across a hybrid system that blends terrestrial networks, satellite connectivity, and peer-to-peer mesh communication, allowing the phone to intelligently switch between available signals without the user ever needing to think about carriers, contracts, or data caps. And he explains that when you remove the traditional carrier from the equation, the cost structure changes completely, because you're no longer paying for marketing departments, retail stores, hidden fees, or artificially fragmented plans. You're paying once for access to a system that already exists and is continually expanding. And he acknowledges that people immediately ask how this could possibly work without monthly fees. And instead of dismissing the question, he leans into it, explaining that the same way Tesla rethought car ownership by reducing maintenance and fuel costs, this phone rethinks connectivity by treating access as infrastructure rather than a subscription, where Starlink satellites provide baseline global coverage, especially in rural and underserved areas, while urban connectivity is supplemented through agreements, unlicensed spectrum, and decentralized routing that allows phones to relay data securely when appropriate, reducing load and costs across the system. And he is careful to say this isn't about replacing every carrier overnight, but about creating an alternative that forces the industry to evolve, because competition isn't real unless consumers have a genuine choice. And then he shifts to the emotional core of the idea, talking about how connectivity today determines opportunity, education, safety, and participation in modern society, and how it's irrational that access to information can be cut off because a bill wasn't paid or a contract expired. And he frames the Tesla phone as a step toward treating connectivity like a utility that empowers people rather than a toll booth that extracts from them. And he describes a future where someone can buy a phone once and know that it will work anywhere on Earth where there is sky above them, without roaming charges, without surprise fees, without the anxiety of watching data counters tick down. And he emphasizes that the $199 price isn't subsidized by selling your data or injecting ads into your life, because the long-term value comes from ecosystem alignment rather than exploitation, where the phone integrates seamlessly with Tesla vehicles, energy systems, and AI services, not to lock users in but to reduce friction across daily life. And he talks about how the phone can act as a secure key, a control interface, a personal AI node that operates locally as much as possible, minimizing cloud dependence and improving privacy. And he makes a point of saying that realism matters, that this isn't magic or science fiction, that the components already exist, the satellites are already in orbit, the software is already feasible, and what's been missing is the willingness to challenge entrenched business models that rely on recurring payments rather than genuine value. And then he addresses skepticism head-on, acknowledging that people will say it sounds too good to be true, that there must be hidden costs or limitations. And he responds by explaining that the limitation isn't technical but cultural, that industries resist change not because it's impossible but because it threatens predictable revenue. And he compares it to how people once believed electric cars could never compete with gas vehicles on range or performance until the incentives shifted and innovation accelerated. And he explains that even if the Tesla phone doesn't immediately replace every smartphone, it serves as proof that the rules are negotiable, that consumers don't have to accept endless payments for basic tools. And he imagines a scenario where a student buys the phone and uses it for years without worrying about bills, where a small business owner can stay connected while traveling without negotiating international plans, where emergency communication remains available even when traditional infrastructure fails. And he underscores that resilience is a core design principle, not an afterthought. And then he zooms out, talking about how technology should reduce cognitive load rather than add to it, how people shouldn't need to understand the complexities of networks to benefit from them, just like they don't need to understand internal combustion to drive a car. And he says the ultimate goal isn't to sell phones but to push the world towards systems that are simpler, fairer, and more aligned with human needs. And he admits that the first version won't be perfect, that there will be trade-offs, but that progress requires iteration and courage. And he closes by saying that the $199 Tesla phone represents a question more than an answer, a question about why we accept the structures we do,